I can't believe it. This is our final session of India Global Week. We have had a fantastic 3 days. Over 30,000 people have registered to watch these proceedings from 76 different countries. 266 speakers have spoken to us over the course of 3 days, from Prime Minister Modi to yogis to railway ministers. We have heard an incredible amount about India and how it is engaging with the world. Many of you are asking us when our next event will be. Do stay tuned to us today for this last session, and do visit India Inc. Group for more on what's coming in the future. We've had discussions about investment, politics, security, trade, philosophy. We've seen dance and we've listened to some fantastic music. And I, for one, have really enjoyed it, and I have learned an enormous amount. To reiterate what we heard from Manoj Ladwa, India Inc. does believe in building great partnerships, winning partnerships, and you have all been fantastic partners to us. So thank you to you for staying with us. If you've missed any of the sessions or would like to share them with your friends, those replays will be available on indiaglobalweek.com. You'll be able to see and share the sessions there. Keep tweeting us, India INCORP, and use the hashtag #BeTheRevival. So now, this session, I have heard the post-COVID world called the new normal, the next normal, the abnormal, and the definitely new and definitely not normal. Lockdown and social distancing, changes to supply chains, changes to what we'll see investment coming into, that's what this next panel is all about. We'll see some guidance and perspective on the opportunities that exist in the post-COVID era for venture capital to recharge the global economy. In a digitally social distance world, how will venture capital and investment change? Industries are changing the way they do business and engage with customers. So how will valuations be impacted? What new opportunities exist? And how can venture capital and investment boost that global economy in a COVID-19 world? Really pleased now to bring on the moderator for this session, Bala Kamallakharan. He's the founder of Startup Iceland and the founder and managing director of Iceland Venture Studio. Over to you for this session.
And thank you for all my fellow panelists for taking the time to participate in this great event. As we look into the world, everything has changed. And what I would like to do is just introduce myself, and then I'll let the rest of my panelists to do the same. And then we'll jump into some conversations and talk about venture capital. My name is Bala Kamalakaran. I live in Reykjavik, Iceland. I run Iceland Venture Studios, and I've been an angel and venture investor for over a decade in Iceland. I'm also founder of Startup Iceland, which was instrumental in reviving the startup community in Iceland after the previous collapse in 2008. I would request Vani, who is one of my panelists, to go next, and then Venky, and then to round it up, we'll go to Deep. We'll follow the same order as we run through the conversations, given that we are doing this panel in a video setting, a virtual setting. So Vani, take it away.
Thank you, Bala, and hello everyone who has tuned into this India Global Week live stream. I'm Vani Kola, Managing Director at Kalaari Capital, an early stage venture capital firm based in Bangalore. Over the last decade, I've been investing in first-time entrepreneurs who have an aspiration to build disruptive companies out of India. So how venture capital is relevant during this pandemic, and which is a very different kind of a crisis than many other crises that I have seen in my lifetime. And looking forward to this discussion, Bala, with you, Deep, and Venky.
Thank you. Venky?
Hi, my name is Venky Harinarayan. I'm a partner at Rocketship. Rocketship is a very data-driven VC, so we have the largest database of startup activity in the world. And we write, AI models and algorithms to identify breakouts all over the world. Thanks to this, we also have a bird's eye view of what's happening in the startup ecosystem across the world, which is also very fascinating to see. Prior to this, I was an entrepreneur. I started a couple of companies, one called Jungly right out of school, and more recently Cosmix, was in Amazon in the early days because Jungly was acquired by Amazon, and at Walmart, where I started Walmart Labs, thanks to the acquisition of Cosmix by Walmart.
Deep?
Hi, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. I'm Deep Nishar. I'm the Senior Managing Partner at SoftBank. And we do later stage investments with a global remit. And I personally focus on frontier tech investments, enterprise software, as well as life sciences across the globe. And so I think there can be a unique perspective in today's world and how the world is bifurcating. Prior to coming to SoftBank, I used to be the Chief Product Officer at LinkedIn. And before that, I had various senior roles at Google. And before that, I came to the Valley about 21 years ago to start a company. And Vani may not recall this, but I pitched her my company and she said, not for her.
And the tables have turned. Deep has said that to me now. So there's a lesson there in venture capital for all of us.
Say more no's. Anyway, jumping on. So, of course, COVID has changed everything. So can we go around and talk a little bit about how COVID has changed your view of the world as it relates to what you do and how you see the future? Vani?
You know, Bala, I was in the Valley for a while, like Deep said, and I went through 2000 because I was running a software company then, and 2008 crisis. But this is, you know, very different. But like all of us who are in this business, we look at opportunity while we understand the challenges. So certainly this is a crisis, and at portfolio level, we feel it at many levels from business continuity. But I also think crisis always opens great opportunity for innovation and hence for venture capital. So as an industry, I feel that the VC industry has a very important and key role to play in global economic recovery. That might sort of sound to some far-fetched, but it's what I deeply believe, because out of every new crisis has emerged great companies that have changed our way of life for mostly the better. And if we look at what's happening, of course, I'm myopically focused on India as a market by choice right now. But if I look at the from my lens of that, the acceleration of the digital economy here is unprecedented, and what has happened in a very condensed short time from consumer behavior changes, which I think are here to stay. And I think these will persist past the pandemic, and it offers many key opportunities. I think local convenience will dominate over global efficiency. If the viewers are familiar with it, I think the movement for Bharat inclusion is here. Number of people that have become very familiar and comfortable with being digital lives is here, and that changes, you know, from commerce to all aspects of how we monetize, how people monetize their time and their convenience. So I think this opens up, you know, lots of opportunities for venture to play a role, even though in the short term, everybody has a different aspect of survival that they do need to focus on. I'll stop with that for now.
Great. Venky, given that you're very data-driven, what's the data telling you from this time on?
Yeah, you know, so what I'd say is overall, you know, it's hard to deny that, to Vani's point, it is something of a crisis in the sense there are large swaths of, startup spaces that were very robust before this that have been really, really badly hammered by COVID, right? So what I want to say is it's human tendency to always look at the bright spots, and there are bright spots, but I would not also diminish the fact, like if you look at something like the sharing economy, right? Mm-hmm. This was almost the perfect, antidote to that whole business taking off, right? It was just completely, has devastated large swaths of the sharing economy. The bright spots, again, since we want to focus on them, one of the things we've seen is this has accelerated consumer changes in consumer behavior. One thing I learned at Amazon was changing consumer behavior is maybe the most expensive thing and the hardest thing in the world. Because once people get acclimatized to doing something in a certain way, they stay with that, and it's incredibly hard to change them. So COVID has changed consumer behavior significantly in a few very important areas. Like I'd say the biggest winner out of COVID has been online education on the consumer side. The other place is online health has also changed dramatically. And the last, on the enterprise side, I'd say, obviously, there's been a huge acceleration in things on the cloud because now everybody is online, everybody is doing everything digitally. So overall, I'd say it's been, these are the three positive areas, but it's very hard to look at venture in the, outside of the context of the entire world, which is, it looks great for tech at this point, but if the entire world's GDP starts, going down into the toilet, then it doesn't matter, right? Because you're also sort of a part of the whole world. So yeah, we are a shining spot, especially some of these areas, but it is still a very challenged situation, is what I'd say.
So technology is kind of in the front and center of the adoption cycle. So Deep, you kind of bridge pretty large economies from Japan all the way to the US. So what are you seeing?
The Chinese word for crisis is we, he. And we is a very interesting word because we means threat and he means opportunity. And that's really, as investors, as entrepreneurs, we have to embrace that absolutely we have a huge threat to humanity right now, both from a healthcare crisis, but also as an economic crisis. When the US has to pump trillions of dollars in the economy and yet the GDP continues to go down, we know that this is existential. At the same time, as both Vani and Venky have talked about, there are lots of opportunities that we are seeing. And some of the opportunities are coming because trends are accelerating, whether it's online education, whether it's food delivery, whether it's the way we work. But I think it's also going to accelerate the next wave of technologies that we have always just been scratching the surface of. So for example, in education, absolutely, our children can still get some access to education online because of Zoom and because of Teams and everything else, but it's a really bad experience. It's a really, really poor experience. And it's not as immersive as the classroom. We don't have the interaction model, but AR and VR have been around for the last 10 years and we've been just scratching the surface of it. Imagine now that as a result of this, AR and VR technologies and the immersiveness that they bring and the richness that they bring in the interaction model are combined with the online education model. All of a sudden, I think we will make a step change in terms of how we deliver education. The same is true for work, right? Again, I'm an introvert. So the first 2 weeks of the work from home crisis, it was like, oh, this is so efficient. I don't have to spend my time, walking the hallways. But after that, you suddenly realize that the spice of your professional life is gone. That spark of that hallway conversation, that spark of that lunch meeting, the spark of seeing someone and saying, hi, how are you? And then having some ideas pop up. The meeting of the entrepreneurs, it's not the same, right? When you first meets a stranger, you shouldn't be meeting them on screen. Our entire central nervous system is wired to seeing people, seeing their body language, what they are not talking about. And we miss all of that in today's environment. So I think even as some of these trends have accelerated, I think the better parts of technology, all the frontier technology stuff that I do are yet to come, and they will also get accelerated. And that's when we start getting true immersion, true richness, and true opportunity.
I think we are probably children of first generation of actually working where we don't meet each other. Of course, that has been true for the software world and the open source world, but it never was aligned with one specific goal. I think now companies and teams are starting to realize that the way we work and how we do things is going to change as everything else. So kind of a segue into what you all said. So what are the things that you're seeing interesting? You kind of touched on AR and VR, and kind of give us a crystal ball view on what you find interesting. What are the contrarian things that a lot of us are not thinking about? And how would you look at them as opportunities in investing? And how do you get the deal flow going here? Maybe we'll start with you, Deep.
Okay, so you're going in reverse order.
Yeah.
So I did talk about AR and VR. The other two opportunities that I will highlight. One is robotics, because look, the fact of the matter is that even if we get vaccines, even if we get therapies, we may beat this virus, but there will be more that will come our way. I think we've now, as humanity, we've all realized that this is not a one-off event, unfortunately, just because of the way we live. And as a result of it, we need to be able to create mechanisms where close proximity, while may be required in some businesses, is not a requirement in most businesses. So I think things like robotics and manufacturing will make a huge difference. Everyone thought that the US car market, you could get cars for half the price. It turns out that there's a shortage of new cars in the US right now because there was no manufacturing.
Yeah.
Right now, it's still not great for the car companies, but it's not great for consumers either. So I think robotics is one area. The second place where we are going to see a lot of things happen is the decentralization of supply chains. And already the US-China trade war rhetoric is going up, but this is creating, I think, a huge opportunity for many South Asian countries, including India, which is there is a possibility, there's a new shot at the goal of bringing in high-tech manufacturing into their countries, because people want to near source, people want to dual and multi-source, and we've really seen issues in supply chains around the world during this crisis, and that is not going to continue.
Sure. So Venky?
Yep. Yeah, so I'd say that, when we look at the world right now, if we sort of just look at what is going on where, and this is like pre-COVID, right, to a limited degree, I would say that you are seeing a lot of technology innovation still happening in Silicon Valley. Silicon Valley was still sort of the epicenter for that. If you look at just, enterprise B2B, we saw a lot of diffusion of that out of Silicon Valley into the rest of the developed world in terms of startup opportunities like Europe and rest of the US and so on. The consumer business was completely epicentered in the emerging markets. And India was, in my mind, the epicenter for the consumer business, just in terms of raw growth and so on. We don't see any real change in that. And we think that trend is sort of to some degree even accelerated with COVID. The other trend that we are very excited about was the interaction between AI and healthcare. For us, healthcare was always the killer application for AI for a whole bunch of reasons. And this was something we were starting to see pre-COVID. And sure. Again, it's still early, but we think that as well accelerates a lot into COVID just because of the increased spend in health and the increased focus on AI. So we think that is a trend definitely worth watching out for and investing in.
Vani, what are you seeing in India?
Just a few thoughts that have been playing on my mind. Though this, as we battle through this pandemic, we will find our core strength to sort of replace fear with hope and make compassion contagious. What I mean by that is we have to and will rethink what are really our communities, what are our networks, what does that mean from a social network, right? We have LinkedIn that Deep was part of defining that product, but today I think we will reimagine our communities very, very differently, and that's globally, but the way it will instantiate will be different in every culture, in every country. I think that's maybe we have only whatever we have seen so far in social networks maybe may appear only 1.0, and especially in a country like India where vernacular has not even been scratched from inclusion. I think there's a lot there, and I think in India I see inclusion as kind of the big theme, meaning that it'll be forced upon us in a good way, and already some stats, if I think about in health, which is a big portion of what we sort of need to recreate in India. I have a lot of enthusiasm and expectation for that. Just since March, only in the last 3 months, online doctor consultations have increased by 500%, and maybe at last we'll create kind of like a digital health stack that allows, regardless of your geographic and maybe even your financial constraints, at least different levels of access. So I think medicine, will benefit from technology in an accelerated way. Education, of course, again, across the world, but ironically in India in the last 6 months, when you would think that funding is really sort of throttled, I think we've seen more money flowing to India into tech companies in the last 6 months than we have seen in the last 3 years. So that tells you something about where some of the opportunity is. And I think there's a lot of frontier technologies which, from an application, there'll be many uses that we can't yet even foresee. And unfortunately, when 9/11 happened, right, our lives changed from security and many aspects. And now also, whether it's future of work, whether it's how we interface in any public places, train stations, airports, whole new set of technology will have to come in. And we are seeing a lot of those already from green shoots.
Mm-hmm. I mean, you're absolutely right. Some of the investments that we have done in the digital health space are seeing some tremendous traction in the last quarter, and I think we'll see this transition happening in a much more broader sense. But as they say, the trick is to be patient about them, because the preparation to change takes a long time. Change itself happens immediately. I think we are starting the next preparatory phase of the change, and I think that'll be exciting to see. So what are your investors saying? I mean, your LPs, what are you hearing from them? Because end of the day, they write the checks to you, and you write the checks to entrepreneurs. So what are you hearing from them? How are they seeing the world? I think that'll be an interesting perspective. Maybe we'll start with you, Vani.
Okay. I think more of the LPs are more interested in India now. I think a large portion of that is probably triggered by what has happened with Jio, and which is unprecedented in sort of Indian venture history, so to speak, although it's more than a venture capital model. But I think there is an opportunity for us to kind of create large platform technologies and large platform companies, and when something like that happens, there is a spillover of many other product solutions, opportunities that come up. I see a lot of interest from, again, as I said, this whole digital inclusion. So I think for LPs, if there is a very concentrated, focused story, which is from well-defined, smaller, I think there are two things. The global funds, the Accels, the Sequoias of the world, that story has always been a, for LPs, a comfortable story to go into any new market. But in India, micro VCs will probably really benefit, which hasn't, most VCs were generalists, in India doing everything. But now I don't think you could do everything, because there is depth of knowledge that's the differentiator and critical. So what I'm seeing is, one, renewed interest in India, and two, focused on those well-defined, focused funds that are on a theme or a sector in depth aligned.
Mm-hmm. So Venky, what do you think? What are your investors saying?
So I'd say that, if you look at the overall picture, right, an LP is usually pretty diversified, right? So listen, we're not in the troubled areas of their portfolio, right? So if you look at where the troubled areas, it's going to be more like commercial real estate. Those sort of areas are definitely where it is seriously challenged, right? Because people are not going to offices, there are a lot of dollars at work. So you got to figure out what is going on there. So we're not really in the challenge area. So I'd say, for good and for bad, I don't think we get the attention at this point that we, would get, like, let's say in 2000 or in 2008. It's also not a financial crisis yet for the LPs, like in 2008, where, the other investments were just all the public investments were all going to hell in a handbasket. So I think I would say, by and large, it's been, hey, you guys, clearly your portfolio pre-COVID is obviously a question that everybody wants to know about, like how many of those are, going to make it? What does that look like? What is the impact so far? Who's winning? Who's not? All of that is sort of important. But by and large, I would say, people are generally very encouraging and very, we're not in sort of the focus area at this point for most of our LPs.
So Deep, of course, SoftBank has a very different investor model, but again, the challenges are probably much bigger from your perspective. Can you share some insights on what your investors are saying?
So we have a fairly concentrated LP base, and SoftBank itself is a huge LP in our $100 billion fund. So as you say, it's a unique situation. Again, they are supportive. They are in it for the long term. Our fund vintage is very recent also. It's a 3-year-old fund, which means we have a lot of dry powder to take advantage of opportunities as they come along in any crisis. There are two places where the LPs have become very interested, and while we were already thinking about it, they're helping push our thinking. One is social equity. We haven't talked about it here. We are only talking about COVID-19, but I think at least in the US and perhaps in other parts of the world as well, the issues of social equity are becoming very front and center. And as investors, I think that we have a huge role to play. We cannot hide behind the notion of, well, there are no entrepreneurs from, pick your favorite underrepresented, underprivileged community, and as a result, what can we do? We have to take a leadership role. And even before the current social equity issues were being raised in the US, we had already started a program called Emerge, where we were encouraging, underrepresented minorities and women and LGBTQ, etc., communities to come in and help accelerate their ventures if they had ideas, and we are funding them. We've also started an opportunity fund now for $100 million to focus on those communities. That is getting a lot of support from our LPs. The second place where we are seeing the LPs becoming very interested also is that just like the healthcare crisis, we have another crisis that's looming. It's not near term. And as a result, we kind of talk about it, but we act a little bit and not a whole lot, which is ESG, enterprise social responsibility. Climate change is one of them, other kinds of topics. And that's also becoming front and center because, many of our LPs are large sovereign wealth funds. So, they think of their populations at large, as well as large companies, and they also have a huge responsibility towards society.
Yeah. I mean, it's a good segue because my next topic was to jump into what should an entrepreneur do, what should startup founders start thinking about, and what kind of changes do they have to, build into their tool set? What about fundraising? What should founders focus on as you move forward? Because you're interacting a lot with founders and teams that are founding. What are you seeing they're changing their tactics? I'll go with you, Deep, because I have you on screen.
Okay, great. So, the first rule of any business is that you have to stay in business. And in any crisis, the first and foremost thing, and, we spent a lot of time with our companies and our entrepreneurs in the first several weeks, making sure that they had good, solid cash flow plans. And for the ones who would not have a lot of runway, we worked with them on fundraising, etc. That's, I think, the first part, which is preservation and ensuring that you have continuity. The second part, then what we tell them is, let's relook at the business we are in. And is it already poised? If you are an online education company like SoftBank in China, which is one of our portfolio companies, you're already poised for success. How do we double down? How do we accelerate it? But if you're a company, in the shared economy like WeWork is, well, all of a sudden people are not showing up. How do we pivot? How do we revamp that business so that you are set up for success? So you have both kinds, right? And there are a whole bunch of companies that fall in between. So that's the second thing we work with our founders. And then the third part is to ensure that we are able to bring to bear our global footprint. And even as China was coming up, US was going down. Like how do you make those connections, and how do we ensure that companies are talking to each other and the SoftBank family is all supporting each other? So those were the three distinct phases of how we approached it with our companies.
What about you, Venky? What are you telling your founders?
Well, the first thing is, you want to have the humility as an investor, because I do believe that every crisis is different, right? There's the famous Tolstoy saying, which is all happy families are alike. So all good times are the same, but every unhappy family is unique in its own way, right? So every crisis has its own sort of differences. For example, in 2000, let's say you were a company coming into the tech bust in 2000, it really didn't matter. You were dead, period, right? So you have to sort of have that humility saying, there's only so much I know. But to echo Deep's point, here's the advice we gave our founders, right? First, you want to figure out, how you're surviving. So usually it's rationalizing your cash flows to make sure that you have to survive. That's usually a 1 month, 2 month period where, you sort of go into that mode, right? Survival mode. But one thing we noticed, especially in 2008, 2009, was when you come out of this, if you're assuming you come out of this in some finite period of time, no one wants to invest in a company that survived this period. Okay, that is a sad truth. I was an entrepreneur in the 2008 time frame. You don't get any points for just surviving this period. You have to thrive. Okay, so what VCs will invest in when you come out of this period is the new startups that were born of this time period, which are new and exciting, and the companies that are thriving and executing really well coming out of this period. Everybody else, to be honest, it's a slow, painful sort of decline. And so your job as a founder, and this is super hard, is to figure out not just how you survive, but how you thrive. And so at each point, you got to figure out how you change your business model. How do you change what you're doing? But you have to find a way to thrive coming out of this.
Right. What about you, Vani? What are you seeing in founders? I mean, at least I've invested in one team in Mumbai, and they seem to be thriving quite well. What are you seeing from your founders?
Bala, you never called me on that deal.
Well, there's always the next time.
But, I think Deep and Venky were both eloquent in covering, what I would say also. But so only thing I would add to it is this is a time to either make a very hard pivot and see if there is a way rather than simply survive. There is something you can do in the small runway that you have to rethink your future. And even in the last 3 months, I sort of see that shift. Some companies, it's always a great, pleasant surprise when they make that pivot, and you see that taking off. And I've seen a couple of companies really, take off, but that takes a very different kind of culture, leadership, team dynamic, and either do that and try for it. If not, if it's a very sort of slow survival, then sell the business, and both are many times decisions entrepreneurs struggle because the status quo, which is not what you should be doing, is where often they end up. So my counsel would be to kind of sell the business, restart. If you don't see a way to innovate your way out of this and don't simply survive, or take your business and rethink what is that new opportunity that somehow you can think of it as has fallen in my lap now.
Great. Given the changing geodynamics as we see them, are there any? Are you investing out of your region that is outside of India? Are you looking at any other ecosystems? Are there anything that is exciting that is coming into your radar?
If you're asking me, I tend to be a very sort of myopic person in the sense, once I set my sight on something, I focus on that, meaning we are not doing anything outside of India. We want to focus on India, and that's all we have been focused on. And within here, then, the dynamics of how we slice and dice, what is the opportunity is slightly different than, what it would be if you were investing in the Valley and so forth. Here, we definitely see lots of opportunity from digital first businesses, definitely see opportunity for global SaaS companies coming out of here. We already talked about how I think India health tech will continue to be a relevant opportunity. Likewise, I think edtech as well in India, and consumer brands. And so I think those would be the things that we would be focused on, primarily into the India Indian next 400 million, if you will. So that's so other geographies we don't focus on at all.
Yeah. What about you, Venky? Are you looking at any other ecosystems? Anything else that is interesting to you? The data is talking about?
Yeah, actually, for us, quite strangely speaking, this has led. I'd say pre-COVID, we really had not looked at Silicon Valley at all, even though we're based in Silicon Valley. So, strangely speaking, this one has given us, we've taken a renewed look at Silicon Valley to be very honest, for one simple reason. Because in difficult times, the market gets much less frothy here. And we're starting to see opportunities in Silicon Valley that for the first time for us are somewhat exciting compared to what we were seeing elsewhere in the world.
And Deep, you are probably further along. So are there any other ecosystems that you're investing in?
I mean, we have a large global footprint, and we continue to invest in all of those. So there are no new areas, but I don't think there were any areas we were missing to begin with.
All right. So jumping on to maybe our final question, which is, how do you think public institutions post-COVID will relate to our world? The venture world and the startups world. I've noticed within the Nordics, there's been a tremendous outreach from the government and the public institutions into the startup communities and founders, inviting them in to participate and collaborate and solve solutions. So how do you see, the role of the government / public institution moving forward? I know it's kind of different for different regions, but you're probably in a good place to see it because you're hearing it from different views. Again, we'll do the same, Deep. I see you, so go with you.
Okay. The fact of the matter is that innovation is the engine of growth in the world. And startups are critical for continued economic growth and job creation around the world. There's no question about it. They start small, but then, eventually we generate a lot of innovation, a lot of economic growth, a lot of GDP, and a lot of positive momentum in the labor markets as a result of that. So government policies absolutely need to continue supporting that. On the flip side, I think technology companies, innovative companies that we work with, also have a responsibility towards greater society. The fact that right now 36% of the S&P is dominated by 5 companies, and they continue to do well every day, and as a result it feels like the market's doing amazingly, that skews the truth. But those 5 or 6 companies also have a responsibility back towards society. So whether it is things like Partnership on Public Service in the US, a very interesting and unique organization that we are part of, where you bring in thought leaders and accomplished technologists to help in public service and government, or doing something more proactively in terms of wages, in terms of job growth. I mean, Instacart added 500,000 new jobs in the last 3 months alone. Those kinds of things I think become very important. Amazon increasing the minimum wages, of course, a lot of people say they're still not doing enough, but continuing to focus and invest in society at large behooves us as technologists and companies that are doing well, and it behooves the government to have the right kinds of policies in order to foster innovation and foster growth.
Right. Venky, your perspective?
So again, mine is a little colored by the fact that I live in the US and so on. So right now, I think, we'd like our public institutions to just focus on the matter at hand. I think we're not doing as good a job as can be done. So before we even sort of worry about how they can help startups, I think it's really, can we, put all our attention to managing this crisis, right? Which is at this point a fairly interesting work in progress. That said, just in terms of what Deep is saying, have a slightly different take. I think as you look out 5-10 years, I do believe that there is going to be a real sort of, it's not going to be as harmonious as we would like and as we would like to believe. I think there is a clash which is coming between the large tech companies and the governments, okay? Because I believe as people spend more and more of their time online, the notion of what it means to be online, who's governing all those interactions, how are we thinking about it? It does not seem like the governments want to take ownership of that. The tech companies are going to increasingly take ownership of that. And so there is going to be a real challenge as we, I think, come into the 5-10 year horizon about who's really, is Facebook a nation state, for example, right? It's very unclear where this is sort of going towards. And so that, I think there was a very interesting example which happened recently, which was the contact tracing that Apple and Google had come up together.
Mm-hmm.
And literally, they were the ones who were establishing the privacy protocols and everything else, and the governments had really no say in that, right? And so effectively, they were behaving like these were their citizens, not German citizens, right? And so I think this is just going to accelerate. This is not going to be a harmonious endpoint, and I think it'll be very interesting to see how it plays out in the next 5 to 10 years.
Right. Vani, what are you seeing in India?
Something that the Indian venture and founder ecosystem did that has been very inspiring to me, and I feel very proud of having been continuing to be part of it, is early in this COVID pandemic, when we realized the startup ecosystem in India came together with solidarity and started something called Action COVID Team, to say what we know how to do well, which is to identify and nurture innovation. How can we put that to social good? And in order to do that, obviously, this is, though a private, even though non-profit, it has to work with government partnership. And then, the capacity within a very short time to raise adequate grant funding. And thank you, Venky, Deep. I know you both also supported us in contributing to that fund. And I think we have provided grants to over 51 companies that are now involved in this fight for COVID across every state in India. So this is a fine example to me at this stage of my life and career, where there is also this pull towards giving back to create some social value from our life and experiences. I think this has been a very fine example for me that there is a reason and a necessity for private-public work to be done. But apart from that, like Deep touched upon, we all are part of the geopolitical streams that evolve, and whether it's in India, FDI, and what that means, from who can we take funding from, who can we not. I'm using the word we very broadly, any startup company, right? Those things are shifting sand today, so there is no line that is drawn, and that uncertainty is very hard on companies. So I do think that as we work through this pandemic, which is a broader social issue, every industry will be affected based on choices government will make, and the government will make choices based on a broader policy decisions, and some may benefit from it, some may not. But I do think that, for many startups, sources of capital won't be so fluid anymore. As it used to be, global capital could go anywhere, and you could take generally capital from anywhere, and capital being a prime engine, this will have to be something we navigate over the next 12, 24 months very thoughtfully, carefully.
Yeah. I mean, it's been interesting for me to watch, because I live in Iceland, and we have a very Nordic view where the government and public institutions actually reach out and they ask for help rather than actually doing the work themselves. And even in the testing that was done in Iceland, it was a collaboration between the National Directorate of Health and a private company. And this was done as a one community effort. And that has been quite exciting for me to watch, where there's a lot more collaboration in terms of solving problems together, and then letting the entrepreneur take the opportunity forward, and then just defining the rules of engagement. And there's been a much more broader sense of funding startups to actually go after these problems in the Nordic countries. The Icelandic government actually speed tracked kind of like I don't know if you know about it, the Israeli Yoshma fund, where the government acts as an LP. They just accelerated and they passed it as a law. Now the government will act as an LP in other venture capitalists setting up shop in Iceland or in the Nordics, and they can actually go to the government and raise money from them. Although Iceland does not have a sovereign wealth fund, they're setting this up as kind of like a precursor for that. And this is, again, as you said, all crisis opens up tremendous opportunities. I see that as a fantastic opportunity for those who want to get into the investing world or those who have been doing investing and not looking into different regions, this might be a good time to kind of expand the horizon a bit and say, okay, maybe I can play a role in another place. So I think we're almost out of time, and I think I'll just run around and maybe finalize the final thoughts, and then I'll start with you, Vani. What are the final thoughts, and how are you moving forward?
Well, I mean, first, I think let's stay safe and support each other and be there for our communities. And there is a lot of challenges that we have to cross, but I think this too shall pass, and that's how I look at every day. Start with gratitude and hope, and it's not all business. At the end of the day, we are each people. So I would say there's lots of reasons for us to be hopeful, and I'd like to part on that thought.
Yeah, Venky.
Yeah, I think one thing you learn in this business, every day, is the real heroes are the entrepreneurs, right? And so this crisis has really, these are heroes in normal times, and in difficult times, it is really, really hard. And so, as much as we can do, and as much as a community we can do, because these are guys who are trying to change the world, and it is very, it feels very good to support them. And I think, especially in these times, I feel like they need all the support that they can get. So we do our absolute best, and I think everybody in the community, it's amazing to see that happen. Yeah.
Great. Deep.
As someone once said, there are decades when nothing happens, and weeks when decades happen. And, we are certainly seeing decades happening in front of our eyes, and it can be very disorienting. We all claim we love change, we love innovation, but we are not used to this pace of change.
Right.
And as a result, the two things that come to my mind are compassion and resilience. Mm-hmm. Compassion for each other, the ability to give each other space to overlook some small things, and having the forbearance and the resilience to get through this together, because that's the only way we are going to get through it and come out stronger on the other end.
Right. That's wonderful. And to kind of summarize at least my 2 cents, I think empathy is something that we all need to work on, which is putting ourselves in the other shoe. And when we look across the world, it's very easy to draw lines and pick sides, but we only hear one side of the story many times. And I think we all need to be a lot more open-minded. And those of us in the venture space know that, humility and not putting your ego first comes very easily to us because we are wrong a lot of times. So being humble and being empathetic and compassionate and looking at the world with gratitude that we're all here, being able to share our thoughts and hopefully help entrepreneurs and other investors and possibly play a role in defining the next decade would be very exciting to see and watch. And looking forward to following you all. And again, I think through the forum, you all will probably get some questions, and we'll be open to answering them on our own if we can. With that, I'll say thank you again, and head it back to the mothership or the hosts of the event. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks again. Great meeting you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Innovation as the engine of growth, collaboration and solving problems together, decades of change happening in the space of weeks, gratitude, hope, and compassion and empathy. Of course, in yoga, we're told to leave our ego off the mat. So Bala, thank you so much for that. The founder of Startup Iceland and the founder and managing director of Iceland Venture Studio. You and your panelists were very thought-provoking. Really interesting to think of ourselves as citizens of Apple and Google. In my house, we definitely are. What I have loved about this conference is how much it has really made me think, as well as the multitude of positive stories and possibilities that I've heard. Just taking this final day alone, stories of people thriving in Jammu and Kashmir despite very tough beginnings, to positive words on trade from both the Indian Minister of Commerce and Industry, Piyush Goyal, and he echoed the words of UK International Trade Secretary just yesterday, Liz Truss. We've heard about Indian railways being 100% electric by 2030, in line with the Sustainable Development Goals. And Dr. Jay Shankar, the Minister of External Affairs, has talked about his personal journey, as well as the incredible role that India has played in providing pharmaceuticals to the world during COVID-19. We've heard about that role that India is engaging with the world from 266 speakers over the past 3 days. Music, dance, spiritual leaders, and over 30,000 of you, our audience, have registered to listen in 76 countries. Many of you asking when our next event will be. Do visit indiaincgroup.com for more. And as Manoj Ladwa said, India Inc. does believe very strongly in building winning partnerships, and you have all been fantastic partners to us. If you've missed any of the sessions or want your friends to see the replays, log back into indiaglobalweek.com. You'll be able to see and share the sessions. They'll be coming very soon in our YouTube link as well. And do keep following us on social media, India INCORP. That is all from me. I've been delighted to be your host. My name is Edie Lush, and I encourage you all to continue to be the revival.